And good afternoon, Producer Susan. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Jerzee Joe. How are you?
Just fine, thank you. Hey, I understand today's somewhat of a milestone for the Jersey Joe podcast.
It is. Today is our 100th episode.
Oh my, 100. I mean, we've done 100 of these things, 100 quotes of the week, and 100 stupidest things I've heard all week.
Yep.
Oh my goodness.
Well, I feel
Well,
like we've probably done more of those because sometimes you have
we
two.
have more than one. Sometimes we have three. I remember one time we had three. Well, anyway, it is the 100th episode of The Situation with Jersey Joe. The focus of the show is news and perspective you won't hear on TV, and today is July 23rd. Um, I was going to have our quote of the week was going to be a real serious and deep thought from the late talk show host Dick Cavett, but with Vice President Kamala Harris now appearing to be the nominee for the Democrat presidential race, I thought we'd bring you some stuff from Vice President Kamala Harris, some of her greatest hits. Um, in our stupidest thing I've heard a week, I'm going to tell you about a new Facebook scam that thousands of stupid people are falling for. We'll tell you what the poll. You asked me before we started what the polls are saying about the Trump-Harris presidential race, and I got some information to tell you about that, and also who the Democrats would have preferred to have as their nominee instead of Vice President Harris. I've got yet another clip of Kamala Harris stuck in a play loop where she's at 7 different speaking engagements, and she's stuck in the play loop saying the same thing over and over and over at 7 different speaking engagements in the same week. Here's one you might have some input on. We'll tell you about a new study by the Federal Reserve Bank that determine which college degrees pay the least. It's the 16 college degrees that pay the worst, and why you probably shouldn't borrow $200,000 to pursue one of these courses of study. Can you guess what some of them might be?
Unfortunately, yes.
Right. Um, Also, we'll tell you how much progress the politicians in charge of running San Francisco are making towards their goal of killing that city. I think we've talked in the past how the politicians killed Baltimore. Well, San Francisco, the city council and the mayor are following they've got a copy of the Baltimore playbook, and they're well on their way to killing the city of San Francisco. Have you been there?
Yes.
Okay. How long ago?
Oh, maybe it was before the pandemic.
Oh, but still fairly recent. Okay, but well,
Yeah.
it's accelerating downhill. It's picking up speed as
Yeah.
it's going downhill. We'll tell you about changes the auto manufacturers are making in their EV production plans. We'll talk a little bit, if we have time, about the iCloud computing outage that affected businesses and people's lives, and go over a list of things that weren't affected by that outage. If we have time, we'll tell you what's happening to the Chinese banking system, which is on the verge of collapse. And our taxpayer relief shot comes to us from where I used to live in Colorado, where a man encounters an intruder in his apartment at 1 o'clock in the morning. All right. So, as I mentioned, our original quote of the week was going to be from did you ever see Dick Cavett? Did you know who he was?
No, but we've talked about the icons that built America, that show on the History Channel.
Right.
And this past week's show was on late night talk show hosts, but I don't recall them mentioning his name.
Well, he was fairly intellectual, I mean, really nice guy, very bright, very intellectual. He was really kind of a highbrow guy, really, really intelligent guy. And all of his guests, they always talked about real serious stuff. But let me play you a clip of Vice President Kamala Harris telling us about the importance of the passage of time. And if you got a pencil and scratch paper?
Actually, I don't.
Well, just try to keep track on your fingers how many times you hear her say the phrase passage of time in this 2-minute speech. Here we go. Let me back this up.
I'm doing a tour of the library here and talking about the significance of the passage of time, right? The significance of the passage of time. So when you think about it, there is great significance to the passage of time in terms of what we need to do to lay these wires, what we need to do to create these jobs. And there is such great significance to the passage of time when we think about a day in the life of our children and what that means to the future of our nation, depending on whether or not they have the resources they need to achieve their God-given talent.
By the way, I said 2 minutes. That was 41 seconds. Let's start this over again. Let's see how many times in 41 seconds she repeats the
I
phrase.
counted 4 so far.
Well, that's once every 10 seconds. Here we go, one time.
Doing a tour of the library here and talking about the significance of the passage of time, right? The significance of the passage of time. So when you think about it, there is great significance to the passage of time in
That's
terms
3.
of what we need to do to lay these wires, what we need to do to create these jobs. And there is such great significance to the passage of time
4.
when we think about a day in the life of our children.
By the way, that was 4 times in 30 seconds in the same speech. Is that the worst public
Yes.
speaking?
Yeah, and you know, these people have speech writers. They are not really making up their own words. They have a full staff of speech writers. So
Well, when you have nothing, I've got another. So anyway, so in 30 seconds, she repeated the phrase passage of times 4 times in 30 seconds. So that was, I feel sorry. I apologize for inflicting that on our listeners, but I thought you ought to get a good sense of the breadth and the intellect of the Democrat nominee for President of the United States. We have more Vice President Harris to come later on here. What else we have? All right. We'll do Dick Cavett next week. All right. Stupidest thing I've heard all week. Now, I think we talked about all these quizzes on Facebook that you should never take.
yeah.
Right? Because all they're doing is scams to try to get your, like on your security questions, like what school did you go to? What was the name of your first pet and whatnot? And sometimes what they do, by the way, is they don't try to get it all in one quiz. They might do 2 or 3 quizzes by the same outfit, but each one gets a little more of your information. Well, this one was, take this quiz, answer 20 questions, and we'll tell you what your educational level is, whether you're a high school graduate, college graduate, master's degree. And I went through the questions like, the town you grew up in, what year you were born. And it's clearly a scam gauged to extract from you information that you use, like your favorite type of pizza topping. But that was one of the questions, your favorite type of pizza topping, right? You've ever seen that on a security question?
And I have to say that's never been a password.
No, but it's a security question. I've seen them. I've seen your favorite your favorite band. That was one of the questions. I've seen these all on when I've had to select. They give you a list of security questions. Your favorite type of pet, your favorite pizza topping, your favorite band, and that's all this is 20 in all. It's a stupid quiz. We'll guess your educational level if you answer these 20 questions. People, when you see these quizzes, they're scams. If you want to keep your information and your safe, don't take the quizzes. It's just a way to extract from you information they can use to hack your accounts. All right. You asked about what are Harris's chances of winning the race. Well,
Yeah.
Well, by the way, first of all, who would the Democrats have preferred to be their nominee? Well, they clearly would have preferred somebody else. By the way, in the 2020 in the Democrat primaries, her approval rating never got out of the single digits, and she had to drop out of the race before the first primary. That's how bad she was polling. So she didn't even get one primary vote. And again, her best approval rating among potential Democrat primary voters was single digits. Now, there were several prominent Democrats that would have most likely beat Trump in a landslide if they had been their party's nominee for president. But the party boxed themselves in when they chose Kamala Harris as Biden's running mate in 2020. You can't pick her as his running mate in 2020 and then try to dump her off the ticket in 2024. By the way, the people that would probably beat Trump would have been Gavin Newsom, governor of California. Probably the runaway winner would have been Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer. I think this country is ready for a woman governor, and Gretchen Whitmer
a woman president.
A woman
plenty of female governors.
A female president. Governor Gretchen Whitmer. She's got a very solid record. She's intelligent, well-spoken. The governor of Illinois, J.B. Pritzker, by the way, he's a moderate Democrat. He's also heir to the Hyatt Hotel fortune, by the way. He's worth $3.5 billion. They would have all been stronger candidates than Kamala Harris. But when you pick her as your vice presidential running mate, how do you say 4 years later, well, we made a mistake and she's really not the person we want to run? So they box themselves into a corner. So now that they've boxed themselves into the corner with one of the weakest possible candidates they could have put up for the job, here's what the polls are saying. The New York Times assessed that Harris falls about 2 percentage points behind Trump's in recent national polls. The 46 to 48% difference is slightly better for Harris compared to how Biden polled, which is 3 points behind Trump. So, and again, these are national polls. So Biden was trailing Trump by 3. Harris is trailing Trump by 2. But the national polls are meaningless. Again, I have to remind people, Harris could pick up another 3 million votes in California, another 2 million votes in New York. It doesn't gain her one additional vote in the Electoral College. So it's going to come down to the seven swing states, and Pennsylvania being one of them. That's why they're considering Governor Josh Shapiro to be a running mate, because they really need Pennsylvania desperately. Anyway, in a new Siena College poll conducted on July 11th, when Biden was still running, let's see, Harris was only 1 percentage point behind Trump in a hypothetical matchup. In Virginia, Harris has a 5-point lead compared to Biden only polling by a razor-thin margin. So it's going to be very, very close. I think in the next week, maybe at this time next week, we'll have some more polls out of those 7 swing states. But right now, nationally, Trump is still polling ahead of Harris. And since a lot of her vote are coming from big blue states like Massachusetts, New York, and California, I think in the swing states, I'm betting that Trump is still pretty well ahead of her in those 7 swing states. Any questions you have on that? Or
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people are looking for a female president, and also, she's of Indian and Jamaican descent. But I can't remember if they had preset additional debates. I thought when Biden was still in the race, they had predetermined.
Yeah, there's one more in September. One more in September.
Oh, in September? I could have sworn it was sooner than that. So I'd be curious to see the two of them on stage together.
September. Well, she will. By the way, so but here's some more the wit and wisdom of Kamala Harris. Here we go.
Be unburdened by what has been. Look.
And by the way, these are seven different. If you look at the video, 7 different sets of clothes. She is giving this. She's at 7 different speaking engagements. So every time you hear her say these words, she's saying them at a different. I'm not replaying the same clip over and over. I'm replaying her saying these words at 7 different events. Here we go.
I can imagine what can be and be unburdened by what has been. What can 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 be unburdened by what has been. What we can see, what we believe can be unburdened by what has been. What 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 can be unburdened by what has been. We can be unburdened by what we have been. What can be.
By the way, I won't torture you anymore. I said 7. I should have. It's actually 18 times. She gave that same line at 18 different.
I think she needs to get herself some new speechwriters. And again, I'm really looking forward to seeing them on stage when you don't have the benefit of having your speechwriters at your.
And by the way, I played 45 seconds of a 3.5 minute collage. What's the word? A collage when you put a compilation. That was 45 seconds of 3.5 minutes of her repeating that phrase over and over and over. I believe the Latin phrase is ad nauseum. I mean, did you want to hear it one more? I'll hit the play button one more time. Here we go.
Unburdened by what has been, where we can be, unburdened by where we have been, and unburdened by where we are right now. Look.
It goes on for 3.5 minutes. We'll put this up. We'll put this in the show notes if you want to see. If if you were trying to kill your appetite and you're on a diet and you want to, kill your appetite, you can just listen to the whole 3.5 minutes. So, but that was her original, extemporaneous, um, you know, how quick she is on her feet. All right. So from the Federal Reserve, the 16 worst paying college majors. And so here's kind of the kind of an overview before I get to the list. The Federal Reserve determined that students who major in liberal arts, performing arts, and theology earn the lowest salaries within 5 years of graduating from college. And this is done by the New York Federal Reserve. All three majors made a median annual income of $38,000, the lowest out of 75 majors in the study. Other low-paying majors include leisure and hospitality, history, fine arts, psychology, all of which paid $40,000 or less, and this is 5 years after graduation. Okay. Now, do you want to get into the specifics, or do you want to take a guess?
No, I think, some of these are important, like psychologists and the education majors. We need teachers, we need psychologists out there, and
Right, but not from CERT. But there's a difference between becoming a psychologist at Johns Hopkins or Yale Medical School. But from the Podunk, you got a degree in psychology from Podunk University in Bumfart, Iowa. Come on, you're not going to get, you're not going to make it. Nobody's going to hire you. All right. Anyway, so here's the the 16: liberal arts, performing arts, theology and religion, leisure and hospitality, general social sciences, history major, miscellaneous biological sciences, fine arts, treatment therapy, nutrition sciences, psychology, anthropology, family and consumer sciences, social services, elementary school education, and early childhood education. Those are the 16.
Yeah, and again, some of the, like, especially the social sciences and the teachers, like, we need those people. There's such a demand for teachers in this school or in this country, and they're such low-paying jobs.
But you don't have to go to a Big Ten school and for $50,000 a year. If you want to teach elementary school kids, a local state college in the state you grew up in, like, in New Jersey, Rutgers is a state school. If you're an in-state resident, you can go to Rutgers.
But it is also a Big Ten school, as you mentioned.
Right, but at the same time, it's an in-state school, so you can go to. What do you think the tuition difference is between a Rutgers and a Penn State, in-state versus?
Oh, I think in-state they're probably comparable because they're both.
No. But if I'm a Jersey resident and I want to go to Rutgers versus going to Penn,
it's like 3 times as much to go to have out-of-state tuition versus in-state tuition.
Right. So I might be able to graduate. If I'm a Jersey resident, I might be able to go to Rutgers and graduate with only 60, 70,000 in debt. If I go to Penn State, I'm going to have 200,000 in debt.
Yes, true.
So if I'm going to, and trust me, if I have a degree in education, I'll get hired. There's such a teacher shortage. I don't need
absolutely.
To go,
we need teachers.
I don't need to go to UCLA or Notre Dame or Georgia Tech to get my teaching degree. I just, go to your in-state. So anyway, so that's the list. We'll put the link to the list in the show notes if anybody wants to go into more depth. There's a lot more detail behind that. All right. We've talked about the death of, you were in Baltimore last year, weren't you?
Yes, last summer.
Were you isolated from the decay, or did you see any evidence?
No, I saw it firsthand, unfortunately.
Okay. And what happened to the city of Baltimore? By the way, in the past 30 years, while the rest of the country has increased its population by about 15 to 20%, the city of Baltimore has lost over a third. The city's shrinking. They've driven out the businesses. And when you drive out the businesses, you drive out the employees and who are the taxpayers. And the only people left in Baltimore are the people who couldn't afford to leave. It's become basically a welfare haven. It's one of the 5 deadliest cities in the United States in terms of your chances of being murdered. Anyway, so San Francisco apparently got a copy of the Baltimore playbook, and they're following in the footsteps. And I think we talked a couple of months ago about all the stores that were closing in San Francisco. And as I recall, they included Whole Foods, Old Navy, Target, Walgreens, movie theaters, and dozens of others. Do you recollect those?
Yes. Yep.
Well, and now we move on to office space. and this was stunning. I just read this. As of March of this year, the office vacancy rate in San Francisco had increased 4% since September to, drumroll, 34%. 34% of the office space in downtown San Francisco is vacant. Now,
Wow.
when 34% of the office space is vacant, what happens to all the workers who used to work there?
You're not getting tax revenue.
Right. And do workers who work in the city, do they shop? Do they buy, they eat in restaurants? So they go
Absolutely.
shopping?
Lunch. Yeah.
Yeah.
Get your morning coffee, get your lunchtime sandwich, your parking, in many cities you have to pay to
maybe a
park.
shop for a new shirt or a new belt on your lunch hour,
Yeah.
right? So
Lost revenue all around.
lost revenue all around. So as those small businesses that were feeding those, and by even things like printer paper, the offices themselves were buying printer paper and chairs and whatnot.
Yep.
So all those smaller businesses are closing up too. So in addition to the skyrocketing crime rates, which we've talked about, well, what else is driving the exodus of business from the city of San Francisco? And this stunned me when I went to the city of San Francisco tax assessor webpage. And this is a quote from their webpage. The Office of the Treasurer and Tax Collector collects more than, wait for it, 180 taxes and fees that are required by San Francisco Business and Tax Regulation Code. Again, can you imagine being a business in San Francisco and having to pay some or all of 180 different taxes and fees?
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
By the way, they have something called a gross receipts tax. Now, unlike an income tax, which is based on your profitability, even if you're losing money, I believe in San Francisco, it's 0.8%. We say, oh, 0.8%, that's not a big deal. Well, it's 0.8% of your revenues. So let's say you're doing a 6% profit margin. Well, 0.8% drops your profit margin from 6% down to 5.2%, which is a 15% reduction. It's worse than a 15% income tax because an 0.8% reduction on a 6% margin is the equivalent of a 15% income tax. And they also have a personal property tax. So if you buy a printer or a new computer in San Francisco, you are required by law to add it to an official list, which you have to send to the tax assessor. Oh, you buy some new furniture, you bought 2 new desks, and you bought a flat screen TV for your office, for your meeting room, you bought a conference table. You have to record that and send it on a form to the city tax assessor because once a year they're going to send you a bill for personal property tax. It's just incredible.
And do you have to pay that yearly, or is that like a one-time
No,
tax?
every year.
That's ridiculous. That's absurd to pay
Right.
taxes on something that you have in your business year after
Right.
year after year.
Right. Now you paid sales tax. So let's say you bought a new conference table or a
Yeah.
new flat. You paid sales tax when you bought it, but now they're charging you for the privilege of owning it and having it in your office.
That's ridiculous. That is
Okay.
probably the stupidest thing I've heard this week.
Well, anyway, so the death spiral is a simple one, and that the city of Baltimore perfected more than 20 years ago, and it works like this. You keep imposing and raising taxes on businesses, which cause the businesses in your city to relocate to the neighboring cities, and when they leave, so do the people who work for those businesses.
Yeah.
And those same people that spend time and some of their paychecks in your city, which generated additional sales tax revenues from the restaurant and local businesses they patronized. So as a result, not are you losing the gross revenue tax from the businesses that were there, you're losing the sales taxes from the stuff they buy, and you're losing all the sales taxes from the people who work there that were spending the money in your city. So it's a death spiral, and
Yeah.
it's exactly what happened to Baltimore, and they are right smack in the middle of it. So, all right, how much time we got?
You got a good 10 minutes left.
All right, so real quick, everybody's talking about electric vehicles. It was a big hot thing. Well, Ford announced yesterday that it's investing $3 billion to boost the output of some of the Super Duty F-150s. Well, they're the big brother of the F-150 pickup truck. And $2.3 billion of that was spent to overhaul and convert a factory in Ontario, Canada, that was previously going to become an EV manufacturing hub. Right now, they're going to and they're going to convert that to build gas-powered pickup trucks, and a 3-row electric SUV that Ford had planned to build in Oakville. is getting shelved until 2027, if ever. Separately, General Motors revealed that it's planning the 2025 Cadillac Escalade, a full-size SUV that will include an optional 6.2-liter, 8-cylinder, 682 horsepower engine. 682 horsepower engine. Does your SUV have a 682 horsepower engine?
No.
Does it have a 582 horsepower engine?
I don't think so.
482 horsepower engine?
I don't know what it is, but I don't think it's that.
No, anyway. So the tide is turning. By the way, the annual growth in SUVs is slowing. It only grew by 0.8%, and it's only about 8%. So anyway, quick note on cloud computing last week. Did anything?
No, and it was the CrowdStrike. It was Microsoft integration with CrowdStrike.
But everything you had still worked, right?
Yes, it did not affect me. And by the way, my SUV is 300 horsepower.
Okay, and you work at the school. Everything was
everything was fine. Yeah.
A lot of businesses around here, by the way, they said sorry, cash only.
Now I do know our local hospital. They did have to go back to paper charts, and they did cancel all elective surgeries.
Right.
And the airport was impacted. Right. Some of the bigger ones. I do have to say though, Southwest, who did not use this, they're one of the major airlines that does not use that software. They were one of the only airlines running, and they had a fantastic Twitter in response. They were the only airline flying.
Well, good for them. By the way, I checked, and I checked at some of the things that are around my household. Here's some things that still worked. I wasn't sure, but my hammer still worked, my screwdriver still worked, my wrenches still worked, my saw still worked, my axe still worked, my bench grinder still worked. So apparently all those things were still kind of isolated from that. So from cloud computing. But talk about smart home where you get your refrigerator linked, to your Alexa, which is linked to the cloud and all.
And I have Alexa, and it didn't impact any of that.
Okay. I know we're running real quick. By the way, the Chinese banking sector is collapsing. They've got banks going out of business, shuttering them to doors. 33,800 banking institutions have failed in China, which represents 13% of the country. So anyway, China is in a financial crisis. Maybe we'll talk more of it next week. But I want to get to our taxpayer relief shot. And why do we call them taxpayer relief shot? Well, let me take you to the sheriff of Santa Rosa County, Florida, who explains why we call them taxpayer relief shots. And here we go. All right, hang on.
If somebody's breaking in your house, you're more than welcome to shoot them in Santa Rosa County. We prefer that you do, actually. Hopefully you'll save the taxpayers money.
And that's why we do them, because it's really expensive to arrest a thug and give him a trial and put him in jail for 10 years. So this one comes to us from Denver, very close to where I used to live for 20 years. And here's what happens when a guy living in an apartment near a university in Denver came home at 1 o'clock in the morning and ran into somebody who wasn't supposed to be there.
A person shot and killed a possible intruder.
Yeah, that's happened at an apartment complex right next to the DU campus. And that is where Courtney Fromm joins us with more.
Yeah, we spoke with some neighbors who tell us everything unfolded in this apartment building right here behind us, up on the 6th floor. They tell us for a portion of the building, you have to have a fob to get in. So they want to know is how the alleged intruder was able to get inside.
Sorry, it's still a little bit of a shock. I didn't get much sleep last night. It very easily could have been trying to break into my home.
Carter, a student at University of Denver, still shaken after a shooting just feet from his front door early Sunday morning.
We heard a volley of maybe 5 or 6 gunshots, a slight pause, maybe 2-3 seconds, and then another volley of probably 4 or 5. I knew it automatically that it was gunshots, so I went and got my girlfriend. She was woken up startled, and we went and hid behind the bed.
He says he called 911 right away.
Police response time was incredible. They were here within 5 minutes. I heard them, sort of saying, "Is there anybody in here?"
And later learned, he says, it was a potential home invasion happening in his building on the 6th floor of One Observatory Park off Evans and University.
So bullets actually went into my wall. Luckily, they didn't penetrate the cinder block. because where they were sawing it out was about 5 feet from where I was sitting.
Denver police investigating the shooting, telling us the resident here was returning home, was surprised by an intruder and shot and killed them.
They sort of yelled, all clear. And then at that point, I went and looked out the peephole. And then I saw the intruder lying dead on the ground in a pool of blood.
Police say the resident is being cooperative.
I'm glad my neighbor's okay. And I mean, it's obviously sad when anybody dies, of course. But I'm glad it wasn't, an innocent bystander.
As for Carter, he says his once safe sense of security living here is now gone.
Praying to God last night, just thanking him for, keeping me alive and safe, and my girlfriend alive and safe.
We did reach out to the apartment complex for a comment on the entire situation. We have yet to hear back, but Denver police say this entire thing is still under investigation, and the DA's office will be the ones to determine if there will be charges. But for now in Denver, I'm Courtney from 2 Prime News.
You hear him say he heard 5 or 6 shots. So this guy kept shooting until the guy was down. You don't shoot him once they're on the ground, but as long as they're still standing, you keep either. It was a very terrible shot, or it was a really, or he had he was a terrible shot, he had an underpowered gun, or this was a really big guy to have to shoot him 5 or 6 times. Have you ever shot a gun?
Many times.
Well, you think you could hit a guy a couple times if you shot 5 or 6 times at a distance of
I
like
probably could.
8 feet. So anyway.
8 feet, absolutely. I bet I could probably do it at 50 feet.
All right. Well, that was our taxpayer relief shot. That was a true classic. And you heard him say he was lying dead in a pool of blood. So that we call it dead right there. Anyway, I know we're running short on time. Anything you want to add before we sign off of our?
No, I can't believe it's such a milestone of 100 episodes in the books.
All right. Well, I'm looking forward to the next 100. All right. Anyway, I want to thank everybody who listened to this podcast for giving up 30 minutes out of your day to listen to me ramble on about things I find interesting, important, and in this case, humorous. And I hope you found those topics as interesting, important as I did. And if so, you hope you continue to listen. Now, if you want to see some materials and story links you heard us talk about today, you can find them on the Jerzee Joe website, with Jerzee Joe being spelled Jerzee, JerzeeJoe.com, with Jerzee being spelled with an RZEE. If you want to email with a comment, question, or suggested show topic, you can do that just by sending an email to joe@JerzeeJoe.com. And other than that, producer Susan, anything else you want to add before we sign off?
And all 100 episodes are available wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts, as well as on the website at JerzeeJoe.com.
Thank you very much for that, and I'll talk to you next week. You take care. Bye-bye.